Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ripple Effect Podcast. We are so glad you've joined us this week. Whether you're listening to this on the go or watching this, we're so happy that you are here with us. I've got Brian Sevitz to my right in the studio and Mary Green on my left, and we are back and happy to be here. Mary has her voice back, which we're so glad about, and so she's being forced to be on the podcast. Before we get into everything this week, we wanted to let you know about the sponsor of the week, and the sponsor of the week is some Tupperware. Now, I'm pretty sure we've done Ziploc bags or maybe something similar to this, but this morning we found this giant tray of cheesy potatoes that were in the oven. The problem was they were from the funeral, Joe Wilson's funeral last week, and they were no good. I had to dump them out. And it made me sad because they were delicious. Some of them were very good. But we could not do what we do here without Tupperware and sending dishes home. And next time, hopefully, that'll remind us to send some food home with people.
So the sad thing is there's no cheesy potatoes in that leftover dish.
There's no cheesy potatoes. There are cheesy potatoes for the animals outside in the back if they would like some cheesy potatoes. And
it is hard because it's a double oven. So that bottom rack is very low.
You forget about it.
You can't see it through the window of the oven, and so it's not the first time that a pan has been left in to stay warm and been
forgotten.
Yeah.
Ours is the microwave. Sometimes we'll put some in the microwave, and then we eat dinner, and then I'll be going about, and I'm like, why is the light on? And the green beans, or something's in the microwave that we left in there. Anyway, there you go. The sponsor of the week is Tupperware, and there you go. That's all you need to know. Let's get into the TLC. Oh, no, we got to review the week. Review Sunday. Let's talk about Sunday morning. How was your Sundays? It was a good week, busy week?
Yep, good week. We had birthday practice again.
That's right. I forgot about that. We practiced.
Because I had been gone.
Yeah. 7. We sometimes, and some churches do this where every week they practice really early on Sundays. Like that's their normal practice time. Usually we practice some night in the week, but early practice.
Yeah, I thought it was good to hear from Scott in your sermon, your little testimony time.
I really expected him to tell some more zingers and stuff, but he was scripted. He had everything laid out. And he did a fantastic job. We were talking about tithing and giving and wrapping up our Money Matters series. And I think sometimes we can talk theoretically about stuff, but at the end of the day, it's like, are you going to do it? Are you going to do what God's asked you to do? And his testimony was a good example of someone who's tried it and can say it's worth it. And doing it God's way is always worth it. So he did a great job. I thought was cool was in the front row, his family was there, at least second hour. And so, he's saying these things, and then you can see like just a kind of a tangible like example of what he was talking about. So that was pretty cool. Did you have an emotional Sunday? You said goodbye to some students. Does it ever get easier or?
No.
Yeah.
It doesn't. That last Sunday with my 5th graders, I pray over them as they are leaving and just try to affirm the good and positive and growing things I see in them. And it's rough every time. It is. It's just, I know they're not leaving for leaving. They're going to be in the hallways.
It's different though.
I'm not going to see them every week. I'm not going to get to plan things with them. I'm not going to be at camp with them. It's just, they're growing up and they're one step closer to being adults. And
so is it next Sunday? That's promotion Sunday? So next Sunday, all of that shifts and the kids that graduated out are moving and call it Promotion Sunday where they're all moving around. My Emery remembered the outfit that she wore to the first time in Mary's class. Aww. And she was wanting to try to wear the same type of outfit for her last. And I was like, Emery, that's so sweet. You don't have to do that though.
She's so precious because, next week when she's in middle school, I get your boys because they move up because they'll be first graders.
It's not going to be as sweet for you.
She was trying to give me the tips and tricks because
how to manage them?
well, just we have a whole bunch of new kids that arrive on the same Sunday,
man.
and then all of our fifth graders who are used to looking after and helping the younger ones have moved up.
Right.
So it's a rough couple of weeks as the new big kids, step into their leadership roles, but we have rules when we're all together, but we also talk about self-discipline and, and it's like, if you can't sit by this person and still listen and obey and have say for everybody, then you need to pick another seat. So I just said, what tips do I need to? So she was trying to give me the down and dirty of who shouldn't be sitting together and maybe if they were having a rough time, which sister would be a good one to have them sit by, or which friend would be a good one to kind of, some kids are just naturally more intuitive. Piper's a great one. Just sit next to a guest.
You'll have the most amount of guarantors in there that you'll have. You'll have
all four.
This will be the most that you'll have at the same time.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that. That's funny.
So she's trying to give me the skinny on.
She was very excited and sad. So she cried a little bit on. I don't know if I shouldn't say this.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Marie, if you're watching. But yeah, they're excited. So if you're a parent or maybe a grandparent and you're like the kids are a little bit thrown off on Sunday, it's because everybody's moving around and it takes a little bit of time for them to get used to their new place to be.
Yeah.
But we did. We closed up our Money Matter series, and we hope that if you missed any of that, you can go check it out on YouTube or Facebook. Or tlcc.church, you can catch up on all of that. I'm excited because we're going to get back into going through 1 Corinthians and get back into some good content on the family, which happens next Sunday. So we're excited about that. Okay, that's a recap for the week. We hope you had a wonderful week and enjoyed your weekend, your little extended weekend for some of you. Let's get into the top 3. Brian, we got some announcements we need to let people know about.
Yeah, and the first one we already talked about, Promotion Sunday. Do you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, there's a few little different things, but if your kid has finished kindergarten, then you move into a new class, whether you're in elementary or middle school or high school. Everybody's moving up this week. And the second announcement is kind of like that. In addition, in the summertime, we do things differently in grades 1 to 5. So if you're moving up to grades 1 to 5,
whole new world.
It's a whole new world. Summer is something we call Summer Blast, and we take that whole morning time, and we have a different set of volunteers. And so our worshipy time, our Bible story time is first hour at 9 o'clock, and then the messy activities are during the 10:45 service.
Fun stuff.
So if you come and your address is in the computer, you probably got a schedule. I try to let you know ahead of time which weeks are going to be like wear your swimsuit kind of week, or you better have shoes you can run in because we're playing an outdoor game or whatever. So if you didn't happen to get one in the mail, I always have plenty extra in the classroom.
And those are very handy to have as a parent to check before you leave the house. Okay, what are we doing this week? Okay, don't have
we
that.
are
up
painting.
on.
That's probably not the outfit.
Yeah.
We always have paint shirts and stuff, but
Yeah, no, it is very helpful to have.
Yeah.
It's good.
So we're looking forward to
And
that.
we're going to try to highlight some
the messy
through
weeks
Facebook or however we can so that you're reminded in the Sunday preview.
Yeah.
So if you're on the email list, if you're not on that, just go to the website, click on sign up, because we'll give you in as many ways as we can a reminder right before Sunday.
Yeah.
Because we know from, one Sunday
It's
to
hard
next.
to
In the
remember,
summer,
yeah.
there's a lot of stuff going on with families.
All right, what's next?
All right. The last one is kind of just a preview for Barbie Community. We did that last year and people loved it, so we decided to plan another one this year. It's going to be on June 30th at 6 p.m. We're hoping to have it outside. That was the plan last year, and we adjusted because it was raining that day. So Barbie Community, we provide meat and we're providing buns and drinks. we ask you to bring side dishes, desserts, things that go with the outdoor barbecue. And we're not doing a competition because it's kind of
A little different this year.
a little bit different. We may do that again in the future, but June 30th we didn't feel like was probably the time to do a big barbecue competition. So we're more, it's more of like cookout barbecue. And so bring your lawn chairs if you can. June 30th, really just a good time if you've been inviting a neighbor or someone from work or something. It's also a great thing to invite someone for the first time to church.
I always like big group things like that at church because sometimes I don't get to travel through the hallways when it's peak busy times at church. And by the time the last kid gets picked up and the trash taken out, most adults are gone. And so there's lots of people that I get to meet for the first time or get to see at church events like that I don't typically see on a Sunday. So
That's really good.
you might be the same way.
Yeah, especially between like first hour and second hour people as well. So
Well, that's about a month away, but we wanted to give you, since there's not a lot of events in the summer, we have a lot of kids things and camps and stuff, but for adults there's not a lot of events planned because honestly it's hard to get people there.
Yeah.
But we like to plan a few, and so the first one is June 30th. Yep.
There you go. All right, there's a TLCC top 3, and we hope that that helps you be a little bit more prepared for what's coming up. Okay, so for the spotlight of the week, I just have a few questions that I thought we could talk about in relation to tithing. In this series, we talked about generosity, we talked about your heart, talked about planning, and we finished with tithing, and we didn't really get into all the weeds of some of the questions that come out with tithing, and that maybe you have of, okay, I get the idea and the principle, but how does that actually apply to my life? So just have a few questions. We can chat about it, and maybe they're questions you've thought of, and I've got the experts here, so they can give us the answers of what we're needing. So let me start with the first one. Is tithing just an Old Testament idea, and should we follow it? What is the justification for following it? Or is it just like an Old Testament idea like the sacrifices and the laws that we don't necessarily follow to the letter anymore? And what would you say to someone that's like, well, tithing is just an Old Testament idea? Because the commands we looked at specifically on Sunday was Old Testament. It was from Malachi. So
It's talking about being generous.
I've preached my opinion on that before, that I don't treat it as legalistic. But I also have my own conclusion with my family about tithing is I do think there's an element of sacrifice that the Bible teaches. And if we're not giving it about that level or higher, it doesn't really feel like a sacrifice of worship. We've talked about it being a worshipful thing that we do, not just an obligation, And so do I think that the New Testament is commanding that the tithe continues as this legalistic thing? Not necessarily. Do I still do it? Yeah, but it's not out of that obligation thing. It's not like this, thus saith the Lord, you must, tithe this amount. I think a lot of people in our world today kind of use tithe interchangeably with offering or just giving, and they don't even necessarily mean the 10th, which is kind of the meaning of that term.
more the discipline.
So, that's kind of my take on it, though, is that as an act of worship, if I am giving sacrificially, it's going to be at that amount. I mean, I'm going to find that much margin in my budget. But if there's a month that like the car blows up and I can't tithe, I don't lose sleep over it,
Yeah.
Oh, well, you're getting into another question about reasons to not. But I'm curious what you think about
Yes.
this.
In my perspective, part of the reason that God commanded his people in the Old Testament to tithe was also to provide for those tribes that were taking care of the tabernacle, the temple, and doing that. And part of that was sharing with people in need. And so I'm with Brian. I don't think it's a legalistic thing, but I think it's a good starting point to kind of say, I save for retirement and I pay, rent and utilities and all these things, and giving back to God is part of me saying, I'm so grateful for what I do have, and I want to make sure that I am honoring him with the money that he gives me. But that doesn't mean that that's where it starts and stops, because for everybody that's a little bit different. You may be generous with missions that we don't support at church, and that also comes out of your budget that you're figuring out for the month or the year, and how much you're going to be generous with things that pop up like meal trains and things like that you want to be able to respond to during the year. You may be setting aside more, but I'm with Brian that I feel like it's part of that tension in worship of saying, I want to give, and I want to never forget how grateful I am that you have already provided what I need.
Well, my giving should not feel like it's the God tax. Some people almost treat God like he's another IRS, and I got to give him my 10%. Mm-hmm. That's not worship.
And then he paves the roads, and he makes sure the bridges are there.
If I'm looking at God like the IRS, it's not a healthy, worshipful attitude there. And that's what I hope that people avoid. And I think, even though Scott and you talked about the word tithe or that concept of a tenth, if we do that with the proper motivation and everything, that's very healthy. There's nothing wrong with operating from that standpoint. It's just, I know people who have treated it more like the tax, and I think that we should try to avoid.
So when you get to the question like, okay, well, that was an Old Testament command, it doesn't apply to us. So I think that just goes back to how you think about God's commands. Like, a lot of those commands were disciplines to help them get to a place of functioning in a way that he wanted them to. And Jesus says, the letter of the law is not going to pass away. It's still valuable, and it still matters, and it still shapes us, but our motivation is different. It's not that we're under law anymore, we're under grace. And so a person who has given their heart to God wants to discipline themselves with being a generous person. And that's why I think of tithe more as a discipline than a command that every person has to follow, or else. It's, do you want to have a heart of generosity that hasn't given itself over to the love of money? All right, well then practice this discipline. Now, at a certain point, it becomes part of your life that you don't necessarily think about it as, the difficult struggle of, I got to sit down and write. That just becomes a part of who you are. But just because some of those commands come from the Old Testament doesn't mean it's not applicable to us today. So, okay. Is there any reason to not give? You got into that a little bit. Is there any reasons that would be acceptable in your mind to say, I can't tithe 10% of my income this month and give it to the church?
Our family does a budget. So when I say, the car blew up and I couldn't give it this month, that money was still given at some point. Am I saying that everybody has to operate this way? No, this is way in the practical.
I know, we're in the weeds
and
here.
This is just the way, I'm going to say my family handles it. Really, it's just me. I'm the one that does this stuff in my family.
Preston's not in there helping you figure this out.
Jessica has, we've agreed to kind of how we're dividing the budget and everything. Yeah. I do most of it. She says, how much cash do I get out for groceries and stuff? I mean, that's the way most months go, because that works for us. Some people can't operate that way, and your family has to just figure out what works. But okay, last year when we did have all those problems, and I knew there's going to be huge purchases this one month, so there may be people that totally disagree with this, but I needed some margin in the budget to make some things happen. In a way, it was almost like an IOU, you might as well say. But eventually, all of that money I intended to give worked. It's just I didn't have to take out debt. I didn't have to put things on the credit card. In my mind, it
Those are still
all,
God honoring.
in my mind, I was still doing the God honoring thing. There may be people that couldn't do that because they have to write, like you were talking about your mom having to write that check every single week, even if I get paid once a month. I'm not wired that way. I have this.
It'll get there when it gets there.
To me, it's very much a holistic view of my life as worship. It's not about checking these like little individual boxes. We talked about praying before meals. If I miss one prayer before a meal, I'm going to be okay. Okay, I think that's just the way in general I try to operate, and so God knows everything about my life, including the stress of this event that's happened this moment, and He helps me have the wisdom to deal with it. It's not like I'm taking out my church giving and never giving it. I just kind of organized things in a way that worked for our family. And 3 months later, all of that was kind of back in line as far as our budget and our the way we handle our finances.
But I think that's part of why God gives us the grace to figure this out for ourselves. Because I know there was a time right after college when it was tight. And it was like, okay, I can't do that this month. But then you look back and you're like, oh, I've skipped a lot. I don't want this to be my habit. So I am going to have to write this check and give it first, so that I'm not tempted to hold it back and use it for something else. And so some people can skip and it's no big deal, and other people, I needed that discipline of having it go first and trusting that God was going to provide, because He always did. Then trying to figure it out for myself and making sure. And that was just a decision that I made then, that, okay, I need this out of my account and to Him, because that's what my true desire is. And if it's available, then I'm going to feel like I can take care of it with what I have, instead of saying, okay, God, I'm trusting that either I don't need something or you're going to provide. And it then allowed my faith and trust in Him to grow as I saw the ways that He provided, or that I was convicted to give up things or to rearrange budget so that more was available. So I do feel like it is an individual listening to the Holy Spirit and trusting that, and not the letter of I've got to give this much, or I'm free to do it.
You continue to grow as well. Like when I was first learning this discipline of giving, I had to operate that way. Well, after it's almost like once you get to the point of Scott and you've seen God really does take care of me. These verses are right.
He's like, I thought about it for 2 seconds and I just don't think about it.
Like I have experienced the blessing that comes through giving. Not to say God, some people interpret some of those scriptures wrong, and that could be a whole podcast by itself. The idea of, pressed down, shaken together, running over, what do all those verses mean about, God pouring blessings in your lap if you give? So now people experience that differently. But there have been certainly seasons in my life where some people would say, well, that's stupid to give the church that money when you got all these needs, and yet you just see provision. There's something to that. I don't see any other way that it could have happened except God's hand was in that.
And that's why I call it a discipline, because it does the idea of, okay, what I receive, I want to give back this, so I'm going to get into this discipline of doing it. Is there any reason to stop giving? I kind of phrased it in a leading way, in a provocative way. There might be times where it's like, I don't have anything to give, but then God works in your heart to be like, no, that's not necessarily true. If it's not money, it might be something else. If it's not a check, it might be your skills to be able to produce something or give something. We always have something to give. And that's the heart of tithing, is God's given to me, and so I have a heart of generosity to give to those around me.
If they're listening to, TV preacher telling them, send me another $1,000 every week or something.
Stop giving to those people. Okay. Okay, just give me a yes or, not a yes or no, but a one or the other answer here, just for the sake of time. You don't have to explain yourself. You just give me what your answer is. Do you tithe off of your gross or your net? Gross is in, this is my overall income, and net being after I've paid taxes and stuff, now I pay.
I can't give a one word answer.
Yes, you can. You can do it.
I do take out like money I'm setting aside for retirement and stuff because I figure that that's going to be tithed on
As you
when
take that
I use
out.
it later. That's the best short answer I can give.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
I tithe off of whatever my paycheck is. Because I'm not skilled financially
to do all the little
to do all that.
Yeah.
But then I also know there are other things that I give on top of that. So I'm sure probably somewhere it evens out. But
I loved Scott's answer when he talked about how his wife got a job and then they got this check and he started to do all the figuring and he's like, just write the check. And I think it is just a personal decision. If you're trying to figure it out so you can keep as much money back as you possibly can, there might be like a little Ananias and Sapphira going on there. Where like, how can I still appear good but keep stuff back? Whatever works best for you. We need to be done with this part, and I'm gonna turn it over to Brian. He's gonna give you the blessing of the week, and then we'll be done.
All right, I'll keep it short because we're over on time. I was thinking about yesterday. I took the boys out to the Memorial Day service. Some of you saw that on our Facebook. I posted a couple of pictures from the Veterans Cemetery, and we were talking about the meaning of Memorial Day, and those events aren't the most fun for kids. I mean, they were willing to go and they appreciated parts of it, but it got long and hot outside. Yep. But it did give me a good chance to explain some about why that was instituted as a national holiday and all those things. And they talked about some of it in the service. But one of the debates that came up on Facebook, and we were talking about it a little bit, was, do you celebrate Memorial Day? And I said it goes along with the question people have said when I would say we celebrate communion. Very similar thing. I'm not celebrating the event. I'm not celebrating that Jesus had to die. I'm not celebrating that these people had to lose their lives. But it is a celebration because of the results of what happened. The freedom we have as a result of those people giving everything. The freedom we have spiritually because of what Jesus did for us. And so I was thinking about that as a blessing. Memorial Day is past now, but we have a few of these summertime celebration times that are built around holidays that took an extreme amount of sacrifice from people. Out of that remembrance comes gratitude. And I hope that you can do that this summer as you enjoy the summer activities that we're doing, that we have those solemn moments and those restful Sabbath moments along with all the busyness and the fun stuff. There's a lot of fun stuff too this summer coming up. All right, that's all I had.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being with us this Ripple Effect podcast. And we hope to see you here next week. See you guys.
Thank you.